Looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you have learnt in the progression from it to your main task? Who's going first?
I think that our time management got a lot better, because when we first originally did the preliminary task we didn't leave enough time for things going wrong, but then when we came to our actual test then we left enough time to go over things and get it right.
I think that I wasn't in this group to do my preliminary task, but from what I've found from when I was in my old group and when I've come into this group, we've split the workload more evenly. For example, Adam's extra bit was to research different shot techniques and camera stuff, and then Abby and I was in charge of developing the character of Ray, and also finding out how she'd come across to the audience and loads of different types of audience.
I think from the preliminary task, when we wrote the initial preliminary task script, there was a lot more sort of care that needed to go into the story. We sort of needed to work upon a narrative, because if we'll be honest, the story just didn't really make sense, did it? It was rather just made up on the spot. But sort of more precision was needed to be made with like Alex was saying, with your character development and your setting.
I think the main thing that we've learnt from the preliminary task is the time management, because when we did that we didn't really share the workload, so it was just mainly Scott doing all the editing, but we sort of shared it all out.
In our preliminary task we used Sony Vegas editing software, and then when we came to our final video we started to use Adobe Premiere Pro CS4 at school, and found out that there was a lot of compatibility problems with cameras and other software that we use to get certain things right, like motion tracking and text. But then I downloaded Cyberlink Power Director at home, which is a newer editing software, which then allowed for compatibility issues to be eliminated, and things just worked a lot more fluently. But because of our good time management we could do that, whereas in our preliminary task, if we didn't leave that time we wouldn't have been able to finish it up to the standard that we actually wanted.
Well, we made sure that we took lots and lots of extra footage. We had the base storyline and the simple shot ideas of what we wanted to do, but we made sure that we filmed it from different angles and different areas. So instead of being close up, we'll do a long shot, for example. But we wanted to make sure that we did have plenty to use, just in case it wouldn't be compatible on the computer, or it just wasn't a good enough quality, because we wanted a really, really high quality film.
I was sort of in charge of the sound that went into the film, so the overall orchestral score that you can see in the film itself. And when we was producing that, I used a software that I'm familiar with because I'd used it a few years back when I was doing my GCSEs in music. And it was a good, sort of a simple software to use, but I know Abby and Alex, you experimented with the software, didn't you, to try and sort of...
Learn ourselves how to do it.
Yeah. One of the problems we did encounter with it though is that because sort of the school had sort of problems with the code itself, it meant that exporting certain parts of the track sort of became little to none. Couldn't really do anything about it, and hopefully should have been sorted by now.
Mine and Alex's main role in the thriller was to create the character of Ray, and when we did her, we explored how different audiences would react to her and how she could relate to different social groups, within her personality.
It's when we were coming up with the base idea of what my character would be, we simply googled gothic standout creatures, people. And we came up with like Wednesday Addams, and then we like moved on to the whole, what am I going to be called? So we came up like we googled names, and there was crazy names in it, like gothic, odd, and empiric names you wouldn't really call your child any day. But it's like we did the whole, how would we want makeup to be? We spent like 3 hours doing my hair one day. And half a can of hairspray, and there was black clips involved at one stage, but we kind of like toned it down because we did want it to feel like normalish, but we still wanted it to come across as like an oddball and like weird. We wanted to make, then I could like as a character relate more to it because.
And to help get an idea of Ray, we did a survey within the class to find out what they wanted from the character, like what they expected from goths. And
I know when we did the initial idea, didn't we? The very first idea that we scripted down.
Oh yeah.
And that's I think you were researching the makeup and stuff at the time.
Yeah. Our first idea was
sort of looking at.
I was a witch.
She was more like a witch,
all
and
in black,
magical,
and
sort of like.
But it was too complicated and it just didn't fit.
It was just
lots of
we had magical twigs.
With the editing, we tried to use a lot more complex editing software and techniques in that software compared to our preliminary task, which was quite simple editing, just cutting shots down and having them in different places, orders, and making it fluent. But in our preliminary task, we wanted to delve deeper into the capabilities of the editing software. So we used different transitions and motion tracking with text, which actually took a long time to get right, but that was because of our time management. It allowed me to go out in my own time and practice the techniques that I needed to get the motion tracking right. And on location, because we took so many shots, it allowed for a lot faster editing because we could just pick the best footage that we had, and it didn't take much editing in post-production to actually make it look correct, because it was done optically in the camera, which saved a lot more time further down the line.
I think one of the other things that we learned from the preliminary task is there was a lot more paper documents involved. There was more great amount. There was shooting schedules we had to fill out with sort of the costumes that Alex would wear. So
risk assessments.
There was the risk assessments we had to go through, the sort of precautions. Obviously, we filmed on location. We filmed like a woods type area, and obviously we had to be aware of slipping over and breaking things. And there was loads of stuff to do, weren't there?
Yeah, it's like the storyboarding. We spent 3 or 4 hours on both like a physical copy of like the paper storyboard, but me and Abby also did a virtual storyboard on the internet. So we did loads of that. It's like from our preliminary task that's got evolved so much, because for my preliminary task we did 6 really bad drawings. There were no shots on it or no like what it was, so we didn't know what we were filming at that stage. But for this task we had shot types, what scene it would be, where it would be, who would be in it and everything. A lot more organised.
We also had about 3 versions of script to give us more of a choice of what we wanted to do.
I know we annotated the script that we used. Didn't we?
We went through the script a few times, writing down what shot types we thought would work at the time, going through whether it would be like a low angle or a high angle, depending on who it was and where it was. And then when we came to the actual filming of it, we'd look at it, and if it didn't work then we'd change it and then write it down on the script to make sure that we knew that we'd changed it, and we'd just keep going like that in a in an order to make sure everything was done and done correctly. We used my camera instead of using school's equipment because mine's better quality pretty much, and I have a DSLR camera which has interchangeable lenses, so I had a pick of 3 lenses at the time and now 4, but we have the 35mm f1.8 which allows for the really shallow depth of field that we wanted in quite a few of the shots to separate Ray from the background and kind of reality. And we also used a wide angle to get a lot of the shots of the woods to make sure we got everything in. This then meant that when we came to editing, it was quite slow to start with because of the really high quality and file sizes of the video, which meant we had to then put it into a different editing software that could actually deal with the high quality, and we had to keep rendering it all the time to make sure everything played smoothly at the time. We also used a very wide array of shots and angles, helping the different lenses with long shots and close-ups of brambles and things for shot types. And one of the shots I'd actually seen done with a bramble and the text underneath from a music video, and I quite like that, so I kind of copied it, but because I like the effect, but it was just slightly different.
When we did the score on Mixcraft, I did the original score and then we all had a listen through it, and there was a segment in which, I don't really know why, but I put like a guitar segment in, and when we sort of listened to it afterwards, like all of us agreed sort of together that it didn't really fit in.
It made it too upbeat.
It made it seem
Too happy.
Yeah, too happy. Obviously, with our thriller being a psychological thriller, it's not exactly going to be happy. So we had that removed.
Should we talk about messing with conventions or a thriller? We challenged them. That's what Belch told us to do.
Did we do
Oh,
that?
yeah. We stuck to a few conventions of thriller genres, going with a psychological thriller, but we did alter some bits slightly by having a female protagonist who is getting bullied. You don't know who by, which if we would continue the film you would find out who and why, but because it's only a 2-minute opening, then you can't get all that information in without losing story lines.
I think that's like part of the reason why we had to like change the storyline 3 or 4 times, because we made it so like everything happened in 2 minutes.
It would have been like a film trailer.
Yeah, it would have been like
a
full-on film trailer instead of just like the opening 2 minutes. It's like, I know when we finally got the rough edit done, we exported it and it was on YouTube, and I showed it my parents, and my parents were both like, what happens next? So I think that's kind of a good sign that we've actually done what we wanted to do, because people want to know.
It follows that convention of having a climax. It makes the audience want to carry on watching the film.
We didn't really stick to Todorow's theory of the order of the film.
Equilibrium.
As his theory starts off at equilibrium and then something goes wrong, whereas in our film we started straight off at something going wrong. We did this to create suspicion and suspense straight from the beginning, instead of it building up, which we thought would be more interesting if we started somewhere else on that circle of what happens. But we never really get out of the stage of having a problem, because it's a 2-minute film and you can't really go through every stage of the theory in 2 minutes.
I think it'd be fun to make the rest of it, because we've all got like the image of how it's going to go, and we just want to like carry on.